Our railway leads to the largest island of the Caribbean, Cuba. The train travels to Havana and to the West Coast. An impressive journey through this country of the revolution, with its white beaches, green interior, dancing population, and of course, its world-famous cigars. In recent years, Cuba has become popular again with tourists. Resorts such as Valadero along the coast with its pearl-white beaches are ideal places to stay. The sun always shines and the Cubans receive their visitors with open arms. The journey begins in the coastal town of Matanzas. This Spanish word means butchering, not immediately associated with this little town when one sees it. But the name comes from the Spanish, who stocked up on preserved meat for their ship's crews here in the 17th century. In the Bay of Matanzas, the Dutch naval hero Piet Hein captured his silver fleet. Nowadays, Matanzas is a ciudad dormida, a sleepy town. Sleepy maybe, but pretty as well. Since 1858, a small railway line has run through Matanzas. The population likes to make use of it. Driving a car is too expensive for many. Besides, gasoline is scarce. There's a daily connection with Havana, but a person who travels by train here has to have a lot of patience. There's no keeping the timetables. But fortunately, few Cubans mind.
En concurrida trayajero $21,000, 152,015, la 049, la 058,011.
Like most cars, the train is not really modern. The wagons have seen their best days, but everything functions and old age lends Cuba its characteristic atmosphere. Taking its time, the train heads for the capital, Havana, a trip of about 100 kilometers. Cuba was the first country in Latin America with railways. The first train traveled in November 1837. It was not until 1850 that Latin America built its first railway outside Cuba. Cuba was ahead of Latin America by more than 10 years. In this part of the world, only the United States had trains before Cuba.
Es decir, en el hemisferio occidental solamente Estados Unidos construyó sus ferrocarriles antes que Cuba. La razón fundamental fue el azúcar, se puede resumir con esa palabra, azúcar. Cuba era la principal productora de azúcar del mundo en una época en que el azúcar.
The main reason can be summed up in one word: sugar. Cuba was the most important sugar producer at a time when sugar had high trade value. The sugar production began on plantations that were near the harbors, so the cost of transport was relatively low. But as the sugar plantations grew bigger, because production increased, they became further removed from the harbors. This caused increased transport costs. It was possible, through severe rainfall, that the conditions of roads also deteriorated. The clay substrata did not favor road transport either. Moreover, because there were no wide rivers on which sugar could be transported to the harbors, an alternative was sought.
través de canales o de las propias corrientes fluviales.
We had to get the sugar to the coast.
Hicieron realmente buscar una fórmula para sacar.
The invention of the railway, that had already proved its usefulness in England, was quickly adopted by the plantation owners. They were the ones who had the possibility to construct the first railroads.
Por los hacendados criollos, los propietarios de ingenio, que estuvieron en condiciones de promover la primera compañía ferroviaria.
East Havana. Here is the fishing neighborhood Coimar, where the American writer Hemingway felt very much at home. The fishermen were the inspiration for the main character of his book, The Old Man and the Sea. Here the train of the National Railway Company stops. The little station is an excellent starting point for a visit to sultry Havana. We arrive during the hottest part of the day, when the Cubans get ready to have their siesta. The trains, too, have had enough for the time being. Rio de Janeiro has its meters-high figure of Christ towering high above the city. One of somewhat smaller size guards the harbor here. Sabato de Rumba means Saturday of the Rumba. Every second Saturday afternoon, a group of musicians performs in an area of the city. These shows are loved by the Cubans. Warm, shabby, and beautiful. This is the first impression of Havana. The city breathes the atmosphere of past glory, perhaps worn away here and there, but no less charming. The Cubans cherish their past. When the economy allows, old buildings are restored, often with amazing effect. Havana, city of beautiful buildings and old cars, but especially the city of the Cubans themselves. More than 2 million live here, mainly on the street. The street scene in Cuba, for the most part, is marked by old American cars. Those cars came here when the Americans discovered Havana as a luxury holiday paradise. With the advance of the revolution, the Americans left, but their cars stayed behind. Back to the trains. This is Havana's Central Station. It's situated in the center of the city and is more than a century old. In the big vestibule is a locomotive called La Junta, which is over 100 years old. Besides being an arrival and departure place, the station is a meeting point. The trains don't really keep the time, and a few hours waiting is quite normal. Cubans are used to it and make waiting as pleasant as possible. At 5 in the morning, the train crew prepares to leave. It takes quite some effort to get the equipment going, but finally they succeed. The nights on Cuba are cool, well suited for travel. The train heads for Pinar del Rio, the western tail of Cuba. When we leave Havana, the sun is rising on a new day. Whoever visits Cuba must visit Pinar del Rio. Its best-known export product, the cigar, comes from this region.
Sí, por supuesto. El principal objetivo de llevar las vías férreas hasta Pinar del Río era facilitar la carga de tabaco.
The main reason to extend the railway to Pinar del Rio was to enable transport of tobacco. The tobacco industry was concentrated in the Vuelta Abajo region, in Pinar del Rio, and to the west of it. Originally, tobacco was transported from Pinar del Rio to the harbor of La Colomba. From there was moved by boat to another harbor, south of Havana, and from there by train to the city. It was possible to do it by sea, but the railway from Pinar del Rio to Havana, the Western Havana Railroad, had as its main purpose the transport of tobacco.
Su finalidad principal era transportación de tabaco hasta La Habana.
In the 50s, the Pinar del Rio region was called Cinderella. This province was once so neglected, it had the country's highest infant mortality rate. With the coming of hospitals and birth clinics, the situation was much improved. These days, the Cinderella of Cuba is one of the finest provinces of the country. The city of Pinar del Rio is the capital of the region. Over 150,000 people live here. The best connection between Pinar and Havana is the train. It tends to be crowded. Pinar del Rio is a thriving city. The beautiful buildings give evidence to it. The economy is completely based on tobacco, and inhabitants mainly work in the tobacco industry. The first tobacco farmers settled here in the 18th century. They came here to grow tobacco to escape the Spanish monopoly. This step turned to gold. Pinar del Rio was so isolated that not a single Spaniard was able to discover their smuggling. Wherever one looks in this region, there are tobacco plantations. The best tobacco, which grows in the valleys, is for cigars. The tobacco on the slopes of hills is good enough for cigarettes. The tobacco plant needs very tender care. The plants are sown in neat rows and after 40 days transferred to the fields. After 85 days, the leaves are picked and hung on sticks, 2 by 2. Tobacco is grown between October and May. About 40,000 plants are grown on 1 hectare, and every plant yields about 6 cigars. More than 80% of the tobacco production is in the hands of small farmers. As soon as the sticks are full of leaves tied together, they're brought to a shed to be dried. Drying sheds can be made airtight. Just here and there, tiny openings are made for ventilation. The leaves are left to dry for 50 days. All over Pinar del Rio, thousands of small tobacco farmers work in this manner. They make a reasonably good living from their harvests. After the drying and fermenting of leaves, they take the harvest to the factory.
La calidad del tabaco de Puerto Abajo es reconocida en el mundo entero. por su aroma, su fragancia y su sabor.
The quality of tobacco from Vuelta Abajo is known everywhere because of its aroma and flavor. It is a work of art. Works of art are made by nature and by people. The Havana tobacco is a work of art. Nature has produced it, and man has cultivated it. Not only because of the climate, the soil, and the sun do we produce exclusive cigars, but also because of the care that has been refined over the last 400 years. The selecting, the removing of veins, the fermentation and the rolling. The people who did this are proud to make such an exclusive product. For that reason, the Havana tobacco is of high quality. Everything is made from the best leaves from the Vuelta Abajo region.
Con hojas de las vegas más selectas de la región de Vuelta Abajo.
When the leaves have been fermented, the last selection is made. The veins are removed. The veinless leaves are sorted in different stacks, according to their class. The women use their eyes and fingers to determine quality. The cigar makers sit at small desks, as if in a schoolroom. For 1 hour a day, the newspaper is read to them, a practice that dates from the time when laborers were illiterate. With precise movements, they cut the edges off around the leaf. A reasonably skilled worker takes 2 minutes to make a cigar. In this manner, the Cubans make 300 million cigars a year, which tastefully turn into smoke all over the world.